Hi there. Sometimes clients or other podcasters or editors will ask me about my workflow and how I do my edits for podcasting or other projects. And so here's a video going through it. Okay, so here we are in Reaper, and the very first thing I do actually is I don't even open up Reaper. I just take the files that the creator has given me, and then I organize them within my Windows Explorer. So I've got folders for each show and then for each episode, and I keep things organized as I go. And I even create different folders for at different stages of the post-processing. So the raw footage, processed, and then so on. Once that's done, then I bring it into Reaper, and the first thing I do is I just listen to the audio. And I'm doing that for a couple of reasons. One, to make sure I got the right file and that there are no serious issues that have popped up right away that I need to address with the client before I even start doing work on it. Because that happens, and you don't want to find out later on. So I just kind of like listen and scrub through different parts of the audio to make sure it all looks okay, everything's basically lined up, just the major stuff. Once I've done that, then I'm going to go in and do kind of a light pass of general noise reduction. And so that's going to be things like background noise reduction, sibilance, mouth click, and maybe some light EQ as well. But what I'm doing is I'm just kind of doing a light pass on noise reduction before I do any processing, like compression, for example, because I think compression actually makes things worse if you have issues. And you don't want to squish things and compress them and then raise the volume before you address some of those issues first. And so for that first pass of noise reduction, I'll open up Isotope RX, which is another great feature of Reaper, because you can open up a second editor and do some processing without closing Reaper, without doing anything. It just, you can either make a copy and work kind of like with a proxy file, or you can just leave it. And in the background, you see here, Reaper actually just puts it offline, which is really nice. And now I can just work on some processing for this file. And Isotope's really great because I can see both the waveform view and this kind of spectral view where I can see more clearly any issues or noise that kind of pops up in the background that you might not notice if you were just only listening. This gives you a more visual representation of anything, like a cell phone, a motorcycle in the background, some kind of constant ringing, and we can deal with all that stuff here. Save that file. I'll also run some denoise here, some declick, sometimes de-essing, plosives, and breath control, depending on the recording. Then I'll save that and work with just that new file that I've processed. And I still have the original as well if I need to go back and make any changes. And then I'll do the same thing for any other participants. And then I will start on a signal chain for each file. And that usually looks something like a gate, a softer gate. Another great feature of Reaper is that I can kind of adjust the dry signal behind the gate so you don't actually get that abrupt silence that you would with a normal just straight open or closed gate, which isn't as noticeable, of course, if you've got some music or other people talking when one person stops. But if it's just a solo podcast, for example, or a solo recording, then that sudden silence is much more noticeable when the gate closes. Anyway, after the gate, I'll usually have some form of an EQ that I use often, a cut of anything below 60 hertz, and then usually some sparkle, and that will come somewhere between 3 and 6K, depending on the voice. And I just kind of listen, and this is where you boost the stuff that sounds good, and you tamp down any of the stuff that you don't really want to hear, like some boominess in the room or anything distracting. But usually this is just a light boost, somewhere around 4K, depends on the person. And then I will hit it with a dynamic EQ where I can deal with anything that is more targeted as far as EQ goes. So an example of this might be maybe some really harsh sibilance that I couldn't deal with using the de-esser. And so an example where I might use the dynamic EQ is this spot here, where if you listen to the S sound, you're getting kind of like a whistling with it. Let me just turn off the cut that I made.
Customer similar, the customer similar, the customer similar, the
You hear that whistle on his S sound? It's much more noticeable if I boost it.
Customer similar, the 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 customer similar.
And so that's the kind of thing where I would just pull that all the way down and just carve out that little tiny slice that's giving me issues. And that just makes things a little bit more enjoyable to listen to, I think. And then after that, I will run some light compression here and then check the overall loudness. And just one quick note here, this audio was recorded for a podcast called Analyze.asia, a great business and tech focused podcast. Bernard gets some great guests. And on this occasion, they were recording at South by Southwest in Sydney. So they were both in the same room together, which meant that there was some mic bleed to deal with. Usually I'll deal with that using a noise gate, but sometimes the mic bleed is so loud that it's competing with the audio that you want to hear. In which case, there's a great plugin inside Reaper that will deal with that for me called AutoMix. So I used it on this one because I felt like it was needed and it made things a little bit easier. And now almost no mic bleed, so we're good to go. And then basically I just start editing the episode and going through listening for anything distracting, any extra noise, and tightening up the overall pacing of the conversation. In the beginning, in the first, I would say 2 to 3 minutes of the conversation, I am a little bit more aggressive on the tightening up side of things. Of course, it depends on the show, it depends on the relationship that I have with the client. But usually for interview shows like this, where the intros they're just the setup for the conversation. I like to get to the good stuff. And so, as I said, the first 2 or 3 minutes, I try to be a little bit more aggressive with the editing and the tightening up of the pacing. So then I'll just go through and listen.
Welcome to Analyse Asia, the premier podcast dedicated to dissecting the pulse of business, technology, and media in Asia. I'm Bernard Leong. Many thanks to the organizers from South by Southwest Sydney and Steinhauser behind me to provide this podcast stage today.
Yep.
We're going to talk about the
Okay, just a restart there.
We're going to talk about the art of product management. So with me today, Tom Verrilli.
And I'm just generally trying to tighten things up. And then maybe, other than the obvious stuff that needs to get removed, I might make some more creative decisions or subjective decisions, you might say. So for example, maybe a spot like this.
We're going to talk about the art of product management. So with me today, Tom.
I might remove that because I would assume most people watching this know it's going to be about product management. And even if they don't, they're going to find that out pretty soon because it's going to get mentioned a bunch throughout. It's probably in the title of the video. And so this might be a section where I just say, boom, cut that. Let's just get straight to the guest introduction.
By this podcast stage today. So with me today, Tom Verrilli, former chief.
Might even remove a so.
Podcast stage today. With me today, Tom Verrilli, former chief product officer of Twitch.
Thanks for having me, mate.
Yeah. So it is pretty interesting to have you on the show and on this podcast stage.
Okay, and that's basically what I do. I go through the whole conversation doing exactly that. I'll probably do it at maybe 1.5 speed, but at least the first few minutes I like to listen just at regular speed to kind of sink into the conversation a little bit. And then I'll listen to the whole thing, make sure I don't hear anything that distracts me or pulls me out of the conversation. Maybe there were some false starts, some parts where the creator said, hey, can you remove this? Oftentimes I'll just get audio notes, right? The next thing would just be adding in all those extra elements that enhance the conversation or enhance the show. Sometimes we need music or B-roll, in the audio B-roll, I guess, supplemental media from the internet, ads, of course, transitions, music stingers, and sound effects and sound design, and all that good stuff that enhances the story. Now, in this case, actually, this is a video podcast, so I would have done all of this editing in a video editor.
Reaper can do video editing as well, but I would just prefer to do it somewhere else. So I might bring it over to Premiere Pro or Descript, where I can have a transcript and do text-based video editing. But if it's just audio, then that's pretty much how I get things prepped for the actual edit. And that's a lot of the work, is just kind of having a routine down and templates so that you can get straight to the editing and the content and helping to tell the story. So I hope that was useful. If you have any questions, let me know. For now, this is just a basic overview of podcast editing inside Reaper, I guess, and the workflow that I use. All right, see you in the next one.